Thanks everyone for joining today. For those who don't know me, I'm Carolina Fox, the Business Development Coordinator at PBC. I look after our incoming inquiries, I lead our tendering activities and support our reseller network as well. Today we have the lovely Peter Berry, our Managing Director, walking us through two examples of PBC's group graphs. Many of you might know Peter already. He has over 30 years experience in management consulting, coaching, executive selection, and facilitating leadership development programs across countless organisations and industries using PBC and Hogan's psychometric tools. He's the author of the Hogan 360, and he's written numerous research papers, and I know he's very excited to deliver today's session. A little bit about the tool we're showcasing today. So PBC's group graph provides a visual representation of personality assessment scores across a group or a team of people. These graphs can be used in both selection and development, and the graphs allow us to compare individuals on a personality scale level. So we can see different differences in behaviour, shared strengths, derailers and values, and where there might be some diversity as well across a group. So today, Peter will be showcasing the value and insights you can obtain from this tool. I know some of us today are certified in the Hogan suite, but there are a few who are not. So as a bit of a refresher or recap of the three core personality assessments, I'd like to talk to them quickly before we jump into our interpretations. So we have what we like to call the bright side, the HPI, the dark side, the HDS, and the inside, which is the MVPI there. So the bright side is the Hogan Personality Inventory, which looks at a person's day-to-day strengths. The dark side, or the Hogan Development Survey, looks at a person's potential derailing tendencies that might be observed if they're under stress or pressure. And then finally, we've got the inside, or the Motives, Values, and Preferences Inventory. So this looks at our values and drivers and might give some insight into the culture that a person might be most attracted to, or the culture they might create within a team as well. So our marketing team are going to drop in some scale definitions for each of the scales that fall under those three core assessments, just for your reference. And today, before I hand over to Peter, any questions that pop up for you, just drop them in the chat as they pop up. And we'll try to get to as many as we can in between each case study. So for our first one, Peter will run through the aggregated scores and Hogan profiles for a group of candidates who have applied for a valuer role. And that's at a commercial property organisation. So this is for a selection exercise. And looking at aggregated personality data for selection allows you to compare and contrast candidates, giving you a bit of a broader view to support hiring decisions and to see how well the candidates might fit into the broader team and organisation. So incorporating cognitive assessments as well can even further enhance that decision-making process. But I'll let Peter set the scene before diving into this group's scores and see their alignment to that valuer role. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Carolina. A great introduction, a wonderful MC for our little workshop today. And thank you, everybody, for your time and attendance. I know we're all busy, but we had more than 300 registrations, which is awesome. So firstly, a couple of introductory remarks. At PBC, we've had the pleasure of working with the Hogan family and Dr. Hogan for about 30 years. He's a brilliant business psychologist who have invented the three assessments. They can be used for both selection and development, and we're going to show you two case studies today. The concept from Dr. Hogan is life is about getting along, getting ahead and finding meaning. And we think that personality and the science behind behaviour is important and should help inform selection decisions and team building experiences. We use personality and 360 data when we're running leadership and coaching programs to get maximum value by using a science-based approach. And we try to align what we do with the purpose, strategy and employee engagement agenda that our clients normally have. So first of all, Thrilled to be with you today and to give you some insights into 2 case studies that I was personally involved in. And why do we do a PBC group graph? Multiple reasons. One is we're trying to make sense of a whole lot of data, and we find that group graphs it can, in a very user-friendly way, can capture 3 people, 10 people. We've even had 40 or 50 on a group graph to then understand, first of all, diversity of personality, which is so important to get along and getting ahead. Differences, someone could be at 100 percentile and someone could be at 0 percentile. And then patterns. Are we all high on adjustment? We cope with pressure. Are we high on prudent? We're very conscientious. So incredible insights into looking at team data. And we try to give our clients extra value. And that means you've paid for the assessments and we want you to get the most meaning out of it. Now, I've got to share a secret with you, Carolina. I was almost inclined to put my family profile up as a case study. My beautiful business partner, Shane Nealon, and my 2 daughters and their partners, but we decided to keep it a little bit high level and look for a couple of clients. So here we go. The client here, as Carolina said, is a global property business. This particular business is a valuations business. And valuations means they can come in and value the price of a hotel, a farm, a winery, any commercial property. So they do hire graduates who've done a valuations degree, and valuers are 90% of their business. So on this particular occasion, they had 3 candidates to be interviewed. It's Alex, Blake, and Megan. And in the first interview, Megan, I think, captured their hearts and minds a little bit because she had high yellow adjustment, cool, calm, positive attitude. She had high interpersonal sensitivity. You can see the yellow data there, the social skill. And they were captivated by the prudence, someone who's going to be quite conscientious. So all of you would have had experiences of who are we attracted to in the first interview? Who stands out? Was there a personal connection? So the first interview was just an interview without the assessments. Then all 3 impressed. So they said, look, now you've got to take the Hogan personality assessments, the bright side, the dark side, the inside, and some cognitive testing. And the reason we added cognitive testing is the role of the graduate valuer is having to be strong numerically to get the valuation of the property right. And verbally, they've got to be able to write up a really good report for the client. So that was a fairly comprehensive process. Now, this is the bright side of personality, and we tend to look for strengths, no matter whether the scores are low or high. Adjustment, they are all very high. They can handle pressure and stay resilient. Ambition is measuring one's perhaps leadership potential, being competitive, confident, self-assured, even an element of public speaking. So maybe the red and yellow stood out a little bit there. Sociability is extroversion when it's high. So you can see Alex, loves parties and crowds, and he's going to have lots of energy to bring to the clients. Interpersonal sensitivity, pretty much a dead heat. And then prudence, Blake and Megan were very strong, conscientious, safe pair of hands, integrity. And Alex is coming out as a little bit entrepreneurial, maybe impulsive, fast-paced, being agile, innovative, not always following every rule. So then we ask ourselves, well, what's the job description? And I'll come back to that in a moment. Inquisitive, Alex scored highest there. And that's about having an open mind, being curious, good at troubleshooting, problem solving, and learning approach. High would be sort of academic, intellectual, low, learning on the job. So that's the bright side. Then we looked at the dark side. And as Carolina said, high scores are regarded as 70 and above. And most adults have about 2 or 3 or 4 elevations. And they are day-to-day, month-on-month strengths. But should you get stressed or be not coping or not caring, the coin can flip and we see the dark side. And we talk about red flags, dysfunctional dispositions, derailing characteristics. So Alex has gone through the roof in the middle of this sheet, leisurely, very independent, bold, very sort of determined, mischievous, naughty, colourful, maybe a bit of social charisma, but getting distracted, and imaginative, lots of ideas. So Megan was coming through in the yellow profile in the middle of the pack, being a little bit lower on bold, mischievous, colourful, imaginative, maybe a more conservative profile, a safer pair of hands, and Blake was sitting in the middle. So plenty of food for thought here. Then we looked at the values report, and the values report, your hot buttons, what you want out of life, what gets you motivated. And you can see Alex has got some significant reds, loves recognition as a motivator. Power, which is being achievement focused. It's the red and the green standing out. And then affiliation, the sense of wanting to be connected to staff and clients and stakeholders. They're all good at that one. Tradition, high would be old-fashioned values, respect for history, authority, conventions and norms. Low would be a little bit more maybe open-minded. So Alex probably had an advantage there of, with the lower tradition, maybe being more open to innovation. And then security, Megan prefers security. Again, a safe pair of hands, look before you leap. And Alex is really super confident, and he'll be comfortable with change. Commerce, amazing. They're all high, no doubt, because it's a graduate role in valuations, and a large part of their degree is around commercials, financials, budgets, P&Ls. And then aesthetics, mid-range, and science, Alex has a preference for perhaps using the data. Now, what we found was that when we looked at the job description, which you should always do when you're evaluating the fit, there were two job descriptions, and let me explain. One was sort of the prudent person, the conscientious person, and we think that was going to be Megan. And then one was there as someone who could grow the customer portfolio, on-sell products and services, a hunter rather than a farmer, an entrepreneur, if you like. And we thought that Alex stood out there. So ultimately, the decision by this company was to go for Alex, just on the basis that he would be perhaps a go-getter, he'd be proactive, he'd be acting sort of at speed, and the goal would be achieve your KPIs of revenue growth and so on. Now, it's not without its risk, because, sorry, I'm just slipping here, there were those very high reds. So what we did in the onboarding, once Alex was offered the job, he had a debrief on his Hogan profiles, and we identified the red flags. What are the derailing characteristics that he's going to have to be self-aware so he can self-manage? Because the journey in life is self-awareness, self-management, self-mastery, which is the key to career success. So the other thing we did with Alex, we were lucky that he'd be reporting to one of the best managers in this company, and the manager was going to become not just the manager, but the coach. So Alex was going to be afforded a lot of coaching in the first 6 months. Now, at one stage, I cheekily said to the CEO, you know, Alex could be a rock star or a train wreck, just with those very high reds that are there. And in preparation for today's workshop, I reached out to the CEO and said, well, it's been a year now, you know, tell me about Alex. And the good news was the email came back, rock star, no train wreck. So they were very happy. And the key thing that he'd done, established brilliant client relationships, growing the business portfolio, delivering, you know, some good commercial numbers there. So that was a good luck story. Now, with Alex, this is the totality of the flash report. For those of you who use Hogan data, the flash report in a flash gives you all of the results from yellow, red and blue. And on page 2, we can sort of turn into a deep dive by looking at the subscales. So look, I've highlighted a couple here. What was interesting in yellow ambition, self-confidence was only 2. That's despite the fact that he's high bold, high mischievous, and high power. So there was a little bit of self-doubt, or the concept that I can always improve. Whereas in the middle of the red column, you might see bold, and overconfidence doesn't mean overconfident per se. He'll put his hands up for things that he's not yet competent in, and fantasized talent, an inner belief that I was born to do great things. So it's not all just one-way traffic here. That's the beauty of the Hogans. We get these complexities and contradictions, and it's like a Rubik's Cube, trying to understand exactly what's going on. The other thing that came up in mischievous was the impulsive, sitting at 4 out of 4, which is where you've answered all of those items for this subscale affirmatively. And that was to do with low prudence as well, where you can see on the left, impulse control was 1 out of 4, avoids trouble was 1 out of 4. Luckily, we go down to diligent in the red, and he's got very high standards. And 4 out of 4. So there should be high quality work, mistake-free work. In the blue, I've just identified some of the occupational preferences, which are to do with what they're looking for at work, what sort of culture, fit, industry. And I marked power. The occupational preference was 4, a desire to be a high achiever, to be competitive around results. I marked affiliation in the middle, the desire to fit into a good culture, to be a team player, to get along with customers. And towards the bottom, I marked commerce, not surprising for a valuers role. But I thought those 3 values were going to be a good fit for the organisation. We're achievement-oriented, we're an employer of choice, and the bottom line does matter. So that was the detail that we went into when Alex was afforded a debrief. The cognitive results, Alex was just a little bit in front of the others. So that was sort of like the icing on the cake, just to say that let's give this person a go. So that was using Hogan for selection. And can I just say, Carolina, we do work with a number of clients where they use it for graduate selection, but we also play in the C-suite. So just recently, I've worked with a big health department, a significant university, where they were using the Hogans for selection, and we would do the group graphs if it was down to the 3 or 4 final candidates. Why the group graph? The client can see straight away the variations in the data and make sense of it, rather than having to go through one profile at a time and take copious notes. So certainly in the C-suite, we do a lot of profiling to help the clients make the right choice.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, the tool is definitely usable across all levels of seniority, so really helpful there. We've got a few questions, which is great. So I'll try and get through a couple before we dive into our next case study. Got one from Aaron. Can you please detail how you debrief the contrast in lower self-confidence yet higher bold?
Yeah, a great question. The interesting thing is we often get contradictions in the Hogan 3 profiles when you put them together. One is, am I a people person? So some of the scales will say yes, some will say no, or somewhat. And the answer is sometimes, I can be an extrovert and an introvert. Or I'm a people person when it suits me, but I can be a loner. And so this contradiction is in the case of the successful candidate, very driven by power, never going to give up with the bold, but the self-confidence, a little bit of insecurity at this stage, a young person about their ability. And I normally tease out, is it that they're self-critical, they can always do better, or a little bit self-doubting at its extreme, the imposter syndrome. So I think the answer was deep inside. This person is incredibly driven, but still a little bit self-doubting.
Great. We had a question on how to order, so we'll get to that at the end of the session. We also had one about the assessments and reporting that has to happen before we can conduct the group graph. So it's pretty much essential that each person goes through either the insights or the leadership forecast series before we can put that graph together. There are instances where you do just one of the three assessments or two of the three assessments, and we can still compile that relevant group graph for that assessment. So there's different pricing offerings, which we'll touch on later as well. Someone asked which cognitive assessment we used. I think Peter, from memory, is the PSI assessment.
Yep, PSI.
Yeah. So,
and the PSI was chosen because it's measuring just numerical and verbal. So the role of the valuer is to put a commercial valuation on the business, get the numbers right, and then write up a report for the client. So it helps if you're naturally strong numerically and verbally.
Got a good one here. Can you describe how to explain to a hiring manager what the Hogan reports offer, distinguishing between competence and reputation or personality tendencies?
Wow, that's a big question. I guess the approach we take is that the blue Hogan is essentially, if I go back to that introductory slide, we explained the blue Hogan is one's values, idealized self, the meaning of life, friends, work, hobbies, interest. And as the slide says, it's often about organisational fit. So in a non-for-profit, you'd want to be looking for altruism. In a creative design, architecture business, you might want to be looking for aesthetics. In banking and finance, you'd look for commerce. So an example would be World Vision, one of our clients in a head office in Melbourne, a non-for-profit that are reducing world poverty. That's their purpose. And everyone down there has high altruism. It's the motivation to change the world and do social good. So the blue is cultural fit. And you remember I highlighted with Alex, he had the power, the affiliation and the commerce, which is really the culture of this particular company. So we knew we were going to get good fit. The yellow profile, I tend to focus on positives there. And what we're doing is understanding personality and its correlation with preferred behaviour. So the way people take the assessments is the answers predict natural, unfiltered behaviour in someone. If we're hiring airline pilots, you want to see high prudence. They're doing everything by the checklist. If you want to hire a salesperson, it could be, high sociability, the gift of the gab and doing meetings all day long. So we often put the HPI alongside the job description and see what's going on. The HDS is another behavioural profile like the yellow, and its strengths above a score of 70 with the potential to derail. And we have a beautiful red flag sheet, which we always use. And people select what their red flags are associated with their high scores. So if you're high on excitable, you might pick that you get stressed or you get emotional. And then we coach, that's what you've got to manage and self-regulate. So look, a complex question, we could talk all day about it. If you're in a managerial role, we do like to add the Hogan 360 into the mix. So personality is the private you, the you below the waterline. 360 is the public you, your brand at work. So Dr. Hogan says you should be using the two of them together to extract maximum value for coaching, leadership development, self-awareness. So where the 360 sits alongside is how are the Hogan assessments showing up at work? Is it all for strengths and positive, or are we getting some red flags coming through? I always say, give me the personality, Carolina, and the 360, and there's no place to hide.
One of your famous quotes. Thank you. A quick one about whether the slides will be made available. We'll share all of that after the session. And a good segue question. Someone asked about using this tool for team design and development. So that brings us nicely to our second case study, which we'll be going through. So we have a team development example, and we're shamelessly showcasing the data from our very own business development team at PBC. So we look at the impact of the group graph on self-awareness and other awareness, and running individual insights and debriefs using the Hogan Personality Suite in parallel with this collective approach can multiply the development opportunity and value achieved for everyone. So taking into consideration some of the key activities that might occur in a business development team, I'll let Peter walk us through the results. Over to you again.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carolina. So one of the favourite things that I love doing with clients is doing a team building session. It could be for an intact team of 20 people, an executive team of 8. I've even done the whole workforce, a company with 120 people. So the idea is they've all done their Hogans, they've all had their flash reports, maybe a coaching session or a debrief, and then we bring them together for half a day to share all of the data. Now, this might sound a little bit crazy, but by creating psychological safety and trust, we explain that we're going to be lining people up in a U shape from 0 to 100 and really get that self and other awareness taken to the deepest level possible. So you do have to set the scene. There's no right or wrong. Personality does not define your whole career. It's the learned behaviours. So one of my other famous sayings, Carolina, core personality plus chosen behaviour is how others see us. So it's the chosen behaviour on top of the core personality that can create one's brand at work. So if we do the human histogram, very high energy, people standing up, moving around the room, taking their place from 0 to 100, a hell of a lot of fun. It's probably the most fun thing we can do, Carolina. High energy, lots of learnings. I was always on the same side of the room as you, or you and I were opposites. And it does take tremendous diversity. You'll see in a moment in our own BD team to create a great team. So having said that, with our own BD team, I facilitated the session, and everyone agreed that they were happy to share their data, and we put the little graph together. So these are the results of the bright side. And first of all, I want you to understand we get tremendous diversity all the time. This would be, typical of the amount of diversity I get in groups. So that's why 80% of our problems in life are people issues. Just understanding each other, understanding the irritants. Why am I like you but not like you? And what sort of behaviour are you bringing? And if you do it in a psychologically safe and trusting and respectful manner, people get the deepest appreciation of each other. And the goal is we want to build a high-performing team. And in fact, this particular team used our high-performing team assessment, which is a great tool, and they got extraordinary results. So we're very proud that the team is the one team, one dream. That it's not dysfunctional. It's going from good to great to awesome. So diversity. Then you pick up that, there were common themes. So you can see interpersonal sensitivity was sitting at 86 for the group. That's your people skills, being diplomatic, tactful, warm, kind, agreeable. So there's, and combined with higher adjustment, where adjustment averaged 65, adjustment and interpersonal sensitivity, Carolina, are the best predictors of emotional intelligence. So, the raw data here would suggest this is a high EQ team. So what are the benefits of that? They get along with each other. They have fun. They enjoy each other's company. They collaborate. And from my perspective, it's wonderful for the clients to experience that. If the clients can then say, I love working with Carolina. She's got all these social skills and she's good at relationships and so on. I think that's good. Sociability average 67. Slightly extroverted group. I think that's useful too in business development, being able to reach out to clients, make calls, go and have meetings. Prudence was all over the shop. One of my teams got 1 and the highest is 95. I'm not going to name and shame the one that got a score of 1, but he has got a lot of learned capability to compensate for that one when he has to sort of spend 3 or 4 hours getting a tender done. So good learned behaviour there. And inquisitive, they're all highly inquisitive at 79. I'm the opposite. I'm a 10. I just put my head down and get stuff done. But these guys are very curious, very open-minded. And I think the bonus is they're very good at problem solving and troubleshooting for clients. That's what high inquisitive would mean. They can do the discovery talk, understand a client's needs. And learning approach, we've got a few people that love learning for the sake of learning, and others that just want to learn on the job and make it practical. So the power of this graph is just showing the DNA of the team and what comes natural and what, where we might need to compensate. But we were lining people up from 0 to 100, and you could imagine the fun in the room, the 0 laughing at the one with 100 and vice versa. So that was the bright side characteristics, and I thought that was pretty good. And then we did the dark side. And remember, the dark side of strengths becoming potential derailers if you're not self-regulating. And a lot of interesting data here. In the middle, I think you can see bold was the highest average for the group at 69. So the definition of bold, may be confident, competitive, determined, ambitious, driving, fall over, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, go again. So there's a quiet determination in this group to go about their work and to be successful. And then third from the end, imaginative was very high, 68. And the definition of imaginative is an ideas group, and thinking a little bit strategically, thinking outside the box, being a bit creative, original. And I think that goes really well in the previous slide with the inquisitive. So you've got the combination now of a certain profile emerging, creative, solving problems, giving the clients new ideas, which we think is terrific. The third high one is at the end, dutiful. And the definition of dutiful is managing upwards, wanting to please, getting along, avoiding conflict, demonstrating soft skills. And dutiful also correlates in the previous slide with the interpersonal sensitivity. So in other words, the team's got very strong soft skills. They're here to please. They don't go looking for fights or arguments. Very agreeable. What else can I comment on? Excitable at the start was below 50, just confirming that they're a pretty resilient bunch. There's only one person up at 98 for excitable, where they might get a bit frustrated occasionally. But I was pretty happy with that profile there. Again, please take note of the diversity in any executive team, in any team at all, anywhere in the hierarchy. You're going to have this diversity, and sharing this data really does help. The values profile. So this is going to tell me what they value and what they expect from work, and consciously or subconsciously what they might be bringing to the team. And I think you can see there the fourth one along, altruistic, averaged 73, and the range was 40 to 97. So it's pretty awesome to have the lowest score still sitting at 40. Altruism, the definition, social good, helping others, customer service, believing in the utility of our products and services, wanting to make a difference. We also have some great research, because we have my research team led by Lynn, and they do an awesome job giving us the science behind these scales and our research. The research shows that altruistic people can be passionate. They want to make a difference to the world. They want to help clients. So we certainly see that in the team. They're very passionate about their work and their results. And then aesthetics was 72. I'm very low on that one. That's not a strength for me. I'm all about functionality, and other people like Carolina make my PowerPoints look really nice. But aesthetics means the quality of the work that this team produces is stylistic. It looks good. It's good on the eye. So proposals, tenders, PowerPoints, they care about quality, touch, look, style, design. And I think that's good for the client experience. Notice we also had science sitting alongside at 68. There's a lot of data. They believe in the science of the Hogan products and what we do. So my team not only present work that is attractive and professional, but it's science-based, based on data, evidence-based decision-making, benchmarks, very, very strong. The other one that I was happy with was commerce at 70, 3 from the end. They're commercially savvy, they're commercially focused, which is what you want a business development team to do. So they're the values of the group, and I'm going to show you a piece of information now which maybe no one's really had the experience of dealing with it before. In the blue report, which is your values, one of the subscales is called occupational preferences. And occupational preferences is entirely work-related. So it's to do with the job, the culture, your leadership style, what you want to experience when you're, at work, say 9 to 5. Whereas the other subscales are about your beliefs and your preferred associates who you want to hang out with. So this one is entirely work-related. And I always get my team to count up the occupational preferences. How many times did the individuals get 4 out of 4? 4 out of 4 in the subscales is maximum. It means you've answered all the items affirmatively. And you can see the big winner here is affiliation. So it's interesting that on the previous page, in the middle of this graph, you can see affiliation averaged 59. So you would sort of pass over it, really. It was not the highest nor the lowest. But when we break down the subscales, it easily came first. So 7 members of the team, and I think, Carolina, we might have had 9 or 10 people in the team in total. 7 people, by identifying their occupational preferences, said affiliation is the thing we most need. So the definition of affiliation, a high-performing team, a very good leader, hopefully with EQ, which they've got, very good positive relationships with clients trust and respect and collaborate, working with other teams, so we're not silos. So affiliation is everything to do with people, teams, and culture. And like I mentioned earlier, we did do the high-performing team assessment. And if you haven't experienced that, we're happy to share some information with you about that. It's a wonderful tool, and it validated that we are a high-performing team, that their results were exceptional. So what does it mean? If the team was toxic or dysfunctional or had a bad leader, half the people would resign because they were not having the affiliation need met. That's what would happen in an organisation. And we recently worked with an ASX listed company. Affiliation was the #1 need of the team. The CEO was derailing, and there was 40% staff turnover. Just horrible. So you can sort of predict the fit here. Also, what's interesting is what's missing. Recognition was 0. So certainly they appreciate a pat on the back when they've had a significant milestone achieved, but it's not as though we've got to go around and give high fives every day. Tradition was 0. They're not looking for the status quo. They're looking for change, innovation, agility. So there's a tremendous amount of power that comes out of looking at the occupational preferences as part of the team report. And can I just say, I mentioned earlier, I've done teams of 20, 50, 120, and this piece of data here is just awesome. So an engineering group, you could predict might be high on science. A non-for-profit would be altruistic. Banking and finance would be commerce. But the interesting thing for me is, where does affiliation rate? Because I believe that leadership drives engagement drives performance, and in business, we ought to have a goal of wanting high-performing teams. Then we also have in the report the percentage of the population that scored low, high, or medium, and this is part of the report. So for those who love data and statistics and all of that, so if I take the yellow profile, just to make it nice and simple, 63% of the team were high on interpersonal sensitivity. So it gives you the mathematics straight away that was the dominant strength of the group. So plenty of good data there for those that love a bit more science. So can I just say, I tend to use, my favourite day with a team, Carolina, would be to have a full day where we use Hogan personality in the morning, and we use the group graph, the human histogram. We analyse the yellow, the red, the blue. We do lots of sharing. And, hand on heart, you get the highest level of energy. You get the highest level of fun, learning, much better than a golf day or rope climbing or some other team building. And then in the afternoon, what we call the high performing team assessment works wonders. They've gone online, they've rated their team. The team could be dysfunctional or awesome, but you put that report on the table and it's like, where are we as a team and what do we need to improve? And that would be an awesome day. And maybe down the track you follow up with 360 feedback if they're managers. That's it for me. I better draw a breath and see if there's any questions.
There are quite a few, so we'll see how many we can get through. You did answer one, which is about how long it might take to facilitate that type of session. And, you could do it in a half day. You could spread it out to be a bit longer, depending on, how detailed you want to get and if you have additional content, etc. But from a participant perspective, because I'm part of the business development team, it's an awesome experience. You get to learn a lot about each other and have a bit of a laugh and see as well where you can leverage each other's strengths in the day-to-day as well. So really good stuff. We had a question about on the HDS, what makes, where are the thresholds for high and low when it comes to the averages on the left-hand side there? You can talk through that, Peter.
So with the HDS, the rule of thumb is to say 70 and above is called a high score. 90 and above would be called a very high score. So, if you're sophisticated in using the tool, the ones in the 90s deserve a lot of attention and in particular identify your red flags and talk it through. But 70 and above, and typically a person will have 3 or 4. Sometimes there's none. That's an extreme situation. And sometimes there might be 8 or 9 that are very, very high. And you might recall the person from the property commercial valuations that got the job was pretty high. So they're the ones we then focus on saying, let's capture the red flags, which is a worksheet that we have and we fill it in, and they can then be coached off that. They can be self-aware. Maybe we take it home to their partner. Very low would be 20 and below, particularly 10 and below. And because this HDS is about high scores becoming potentially derailers, strengths crossing the line and becoming negative, so to speak, a very low score could be a watch out. In other words, it's the absence of a strength. So if you look at this sheet that we've got here, if we go to the second last one, diligent, there's 2 or 3 people that naturally want to have lots of balls in the air. They're inquisitive, they've got high imaginative, and their learning is to cross your T's and dot your I's. If you're putting in a tender, just persevere with the boring and the routine. So they're little watch outs if you're down below 20. And mid-range, anywhere between 40 and 60, there's not really much to talk about there. It's not too high or too low. But always remember, we turn the page and look at the flash report, because sometimes you might see 4 red bricks.
Awesome. We'll squeeze in another. Is there an ideal team profile that you would sort of notice? There's a bit of detail here. Is that one with a lot of alignment to support cohesion or a lot of variability to support diversity? How do you support the team leader to manage the downside of each of those profiles?
Yeah, a great question. We could spend half an hour on that. So let me be frank, if I could. If I start with the HPI, depending on the industry, depending on the job, different scales matter more than others, maybe particularly with the blue values, like the altruism for a non-for-profit, or science for an engineer. So if I look at the HPI, the yellow profile, higher adjustment can be an advantage, just being able to cope better with stress and stay positive. Otherwise, if you've got a very low score, it needs to be a learned behavior, being resilient and burning off bad stress. Ambition, a reasonable score there, can help with being confident, self-assured, networking, leader-like. Sociability, we don't find, unless it's job-specific like sales, that high or low is better. I'm pretty neutral on that one. interpersonal sensitivity does matter. It's about social skill, what Dr. Hogan calls getting along, getting ahead. So, and then we put the combination of adjustment and interpersonal sensitivity, and that could be a baseline of EQ. Otherwise, it has to be learned. Prudence is interesting. I mentioned before an airline pilot would have to have 80 to 100 on prudent. We're just signing off on the paperwork before we take off. A surgeon in an operating theatre, you'd want to have prudence when you've had your anaesthetic and they're about to do the job. Otherwise, we find CEOs are about 30 on prudence, changing a business, growing a business, innovation, agile. Inquisitive, I don't think matters a real lot, except the takeaway from a high score is that in this particular team, they're good at being open-minded, curious, problem solving. And then we go to the dark side. I just think, to be honest here, if everyone's got 2 or 3 elevations, they just need to be self-aware, transitioning to self-managing, and then eventually self-mastery, being the best version of themselves and having career success. So I really think the red one is about bring your strengths to the table and manage those derailers. Now, just as you've got diversity sitting here, hand on heart, every team I do has diversity. Why? There's different people in different roles. Why? We do want diversity of personality to start with, and then thinking and some behaviour. But I think the third one's interesting. This is probably where you're looking for culture fit. So a non-for-profit, you'd be recommending altruism should be significant. A bunch of engineers or IT, it would be science. A creative sort of business, architecture, aesthetics. So I think the blue one, you check for cultural fit. Is the person going to fit in? I mentioned World Vision earlier, where it's all about altruism and tradition. They're the 2 key drivers. And I had a personal friend that I knew who went into a finance role there, and he had neither altruism or tradition and felt like a fish out of water. He lasted 6 months, just said, it's not me. So I think the blue one can be used for cultural fit.
Great. We had a good question about standard deviation. Is there any guidance you can provide around what level of standard deviation indicates an average level of variation?
Sure. So first of all, there'll always be some standard deviation because it reflects the amount of diversity in the scores. You're always going to have some in the 90s and some below 20. Look, I don't think I place a lot of weight on how much standard deviation there is. You'll see with the PBC team here, it was by and large pretty normal. There was nothing sticking out. I have had, Carolina, sometimes a situation where half the team were all high, above 65, and the other half were all low, below 35, nothing in the middle. Then you have to talk out, how does that play out at work? That half of you are driven by science maybe, and half are driven by intuition and life's experiences. And how does that play out when you come together to make decisions? So I think it's the talking point that you then deal with that data in a constructive way. But I actually think the graph speaks for itself. This is, if people see this up on the screen, they're gobsmacked. They just go, oh my God, is this our team? Where do I fit in? And then it's to do with your goals in life. Are we striving to be a high-performing team? Do we want to be an employer of choice? Is our purpose, strategy, and goals crystal clear? And the idea of one team, one dream with a good level of accountability. So get the strategy right, get the culture right, and you want the one team, one dream, not silos or infighting or dysfunctionality. Can I just say, Carolina, maybe it's my grey hair, but I'm spending a lot of time in the last year sorting out very serious problems at the top of the organisational tree. The CEO's fighting with the board, the CEO's got a dysfunctional team, and the old saying, the fish rots from the head. So you then go down and find out the employee experience is not positive, there's staff turnover, their engagement scores are poor. So this work is important for at every level of the organisation, but ideally it's the CEO, the management team and teams too that should really be aligning their leadership spend to self-awareness so they can deliver the strategy and the engagement goals.
And it builds that buy-in if teams below them will start to do the same sort of development initiatives as well.
So. Yeah, absolutely. So get team one right, and then the members of team one who are not the CEO, they should then be duplicating this at the next level.
Great. We did have a few more questions, but we might write up some answers to all of them and distribute a bit of a Q&A after the session because we won't have time for them all, sadly. But as we do wrap up, firstly, thank you very much, Peter. That was great. I'm sure everyone found a bit of value there. But a few quick little notes and reminders before you jump off. So these group graphs can be purchased. We've got an online order form and we can share more detail around how to order and a bit about the pricing structure as well, because there's a few different options that you can order. For example, ones with those frequency tables that Peter spoke to, and without as well. So to be able to interpret and debrief these graphs, you must be Hogan certified. So for those who aren't, PBC's consulting team can facilitate the group graphs if need be. And that could be for both selection purposes or development. If you are interested in becoming certified, we'll share some information on our upcoming workshops. We do both face-to-face and virtual. And if you are already certified, we have an amazing interpretation helpline run by our consulting team. So we offer complimentary support, 15-minute calls if you get stuck on a tricky profile. And for those who want to sort of take their skills to the next level, we have advanced workshops as well. So we'll include some information for all of those options in our follow-up email. And our business development team, which now I feel like you know all of us very well. We're here for any solution design or ordering queries, any questions. So we'll put a little link to contact us if you need to. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon.